Good evening. This is the Mount Pleasant Waterworks tropical update on Hurricane Irma. Currently it is Tuesday, September 5th, 2017, approximately 6:30 p.m. So just wanted to do a quick update and experimenting with video format to see how this works out. So here is the 5 p.m. information from the National Hurricane Center. Here's the 5 p.m. position of the storm, 184 miles per hour. Um, If you haven't heard, it is the strongest hurricane on record in the Atlantic Ocean. There have been stronger storms in the Caribbean and in the Gulf of Mexico, but as far as in the actual Atlantic Ocean, this is now the record holder for all time. And the forecast track hasn't changed significantly for several days now. This white track shows the National Hurricane Center's official forecast going out 5 days, and the center of the system is expected to move north of Puerto Rico, north of the island of Hispaniola, and north of Cuba, coming very close to the coast of Cuba, and then somewhere in here, beginning to make a turn to the right or more to the north. The problem has been for a couple of days now exactly when, where, and how sharp that turn happens somewhere in this area is going to make a difference on what happens, particularly for Mount Pleasant, Charleston, coast of South Carolina, or Georgia, North Carolina for that matter. Kind of three basic broad scenarios that are playing out with the models if you're watching them. One has the center moving past the tip of Florida and then making landfall somewhere along the west coast of Florida and then moving inland and basically north from there. Kind of a middle school of the models is that it makes landfall somewhere right on the tip of Florida and kind of moves up the state north from there. The third school of models has it either grazing the east coast of Florida or possibly even missing Florida altogether, moving north from there, which puts uh, anywhere from Georgia, South Carolina, even North Carolina would sort of be in the bullseye at that point, and all those are still very much possibilities. Where this thing goes after this general area of South Florida, um, there's not much confidence in that at this point. And the models, as they do this far out, they're shifting. Sometimes they will show one side of Florida, the next run they may be on the other side or down the center of the state, and it alternates from run to run. So if you're watching the spaghetti plots, don't get hung up on any one particular plot. The thing to look for, if you use those for anything, is look for overall trends and patterns of if they move a certain direction or tend to hold steady over and over, then that begins to increase the confidence. When they're kind of flip-flopping back and forth, you just don't know. It's up in the air as to what the various models think is going to happen. But I did want to look at a couple of models, which is why I wanted to do a video because it's a little easier to do in this format. So the first thing I'll do is show you the latest, some of the track models. This isn't all of them. I've excluded some that are just absolutely poor performers, and I'll highlight here. The heavy white line is the National Hurricane Center's official forecast, and you can see scattered all around that there probably are about 20 other tracks in there. Some of these are individual models. Some are what are called consensus models, which means they actually use the output from other models, from multiple other models, and try to average them to kind of come up with a best guess um, of a combined average from some of the other models. So if you're looking at these spaghetti plots, you need to know what you're looking at. Some of these models are not very reliable. Some are. So there's just a lot to understand here, other than just kind of looking at big picture patterns and trends, which is what these are helpful for. So these are the latest track models, and you can kind of see what I was talking about. I'll get rid of that heavy white line because it obscures a little bit of this, but you can see some of the models are going far south of Florida, going over Cuba, and coming well into the Gulf of Mexico. That's possible, but that's kind of becoming less likely. There's a group of models kind of clustered in here that are sort of right on top of the National Hurricane Center's track that was basically in there thinking it's going to miss the tip of Florida and probably come up something in here. These particular models just don't go out that far in time. They're stopping at about 5 days. And then here's kind of the other group of models that are thinking somewhere along the East Coast and then moving up toward Mount Pleasant, Charleston general area. Um, and this has been pretty consistent with one of the big global models, the GFS model, which doesn't necessarily have a single track shown here. Actually, I think this red track is probably the best representation of the previous GFS run. And it's been pretty consistent on this grazing the east coast of Florida down near Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and there, staying over water, and then moving up here and coming somewhere. It's flip-flop back and forth. It's shown landfall in North Carolina. It's shown landfall in Myrtle Beach area. It's been close to Charleston, um, and currently it's down in middle Georgia. Again, this was the previous run. A new run just came out a short while ago, and it hasn't been reflected in these tracks yet, but I'll show you exactly what that is here in just a minute. So just wanted to show you what those models were. Again, you can't get too worried or too comfortable on one particular run. What's important with these guys is kind of the long range trend, run after run after run. What are they doing and what are you seeing? All right, so that's it for that. Now I want to show you these two global models. This is the GFS model, and this just came out. Just became the output became available just within about the last 10 or 15 minutes of when I'm recording this. So this is already into the forecast period. This is about 8 a.m. Friday morning. This is where the GFS model, this is one single model. It's the American Global model. This is where it's predicting it to be. And I'm going to move this through time. And this particular graphic moves in 3 hour intervals. So every time I move, it's 3 hours later. So it now is thinking it will come through the Bahamas, which is a slight change. It has it a little farther north here than previous runs. And then turning and actually missing Florida completely, which is new. Numerous runs from this model have had it either landfalling on eastern Florida or at least grazing Florida. This now shows it curving and completely missing Florida and then moving pretty much north from there with landfall around Wilmington, North Carolina, right at the North Carolina-South Carolina border. Again, that's new. It's been here before. A couple of days ago, this is where the GFS was kind of thinking landfall was, and then it started trending more down into South Carolina, and most recently, even as far down into Georgia. So there's the latest GFS. Again, you can't get too focused on one particular run because the next one will be different. But misses Florida and makes landfall around Wilmington, North Carolina, and kind of moves north from there. All right, so let's go back here to 8 a.m. Friday morning, and I'm going to change to the European version of this same global forecast model. Here's where it thinks it is, 8 a.m. Friday morning Eastern Time, and I'll move it forward. This model only produces a plot that's available to the public every 24 hours. So we're gonna, every time I move forward, that one step moves 24 hours, so bigger jumps. All right, so here's the first one. It keeps it farther south than the GFS did. GFS had it coming through the Bahamas up here. The European is saying it's going to stay further south, and it's been doing this for several runs. Has it making landfall on Cuba, staying over Cuba for a bit, then coming off the north coast of Cuba here and making the north turn there, and then another landfall on the southwest coast of Florida in here. So rather than coming to the very tip of Florida, it has it overshoot the tip a little bit and then turn back in, make landfall in Florida, and then move basically north from there. And it's going to be over land, so it will definitely be weakening and being disrupted as it moves north. Doesn't mean our area might still get some kind of ugly weather, but it won't be a Category 4 hurricane. And then it moves north from there. So those are the two global models thinking, and that's been the problem for a couple of days now. Is some of the more reliable models are thinking something like that, somewhere near the East Coast, and then coming up to coastal South Carolina, North Carolina. The other models are thinking more along either coming right up the middle of Florida or the southwest coast of Florida and then coming in. So, bottom line is still what I've been saying for days. It's just too soon to call. There's too much uncertainty. The models do not agree on what's going to happen after it gets into this area between Cuba and South Florida. So, unfortunately, we just have to wait and have to understand that we are one of basically three scenarios that are all equally possible. Um, if it does this GFS latest run, I gotta let this build back up. Takes a minute to build the data that's behind these graphics. If it misses Florida completely and comes up our way, um, and landfall ends up being anywhere around coastal South Carolina, this could very easily still be a Category 4 storm at that point. So this is the real deal, and we need to take it seriously. Um, the last run had it making landfall in the middle of Georgia. Now it's showing Wilmington, North Carolina. And again, the next run will be different, which way it goes and how it flip flops. We just have to wait to see. And the closer it gets in time, obviously, the more accurate the models will probably be. And when you start seeing the models agreeing, when the European and the GFS and some of the other specific hurricane models all begin to agree on a track, then there's a lot more confidence that that is likely what's going to happen. Right now, that confidence isn't there because they're all over the place after South Florida. Um, all the doors are still open and all those things are still possibilities. So that's it for today. Stay safe, and I will see you next time.